and welcome to episode 3 of the podcast. This morning, I'm going to talk about China and how it became a creation of the West. There seems to be quite an interesting thing happening lately, where everybody's looking at the might of this nation, both in terms of economical power, but also military power. And no one seems to acknowledge the fact that it is our fault for the way China are today. And if you think about it, you can see where I'm coming from. So let me give you an example. Back in the 80s actually, this is when Western countries started to move their production capabilities to China. And the reason was very simple. I could call it greed, or I could call it the beginning of a consumerism attitude. But the fact is, some companies realize that they could take advantage of the low wages paid to the people in China and get them to produce things, which then they could buy and offset here in the West for some very tidy profits. That, of course, put a lot of people out of a job because local businesses, local industries and manufacturing plants could not compete with that. Of course, how can you? You have this problem worldwide where people are not paid the same and do not have the same standard of living. So if you find a country where people are not paid a lot, but they're willing to work, you can pay them a few dollars a day or even less and get them to produce stuff, which then you sell in the West, where people have the money. So you see, it's a let's call it an economical thing, but it's also focused on short-term profit. The result of this was that more and more businesses from the 80s up to now have started to produce things in other parts of the world, and not necessarily just China, but China was a big option, and it benefited probably the most. And the result of that, when you think about it, it's actually quite brilliant. China used to be very poor, people used to be very poor, not have enough jobs, too many people, all that kind of stuff. All of a sudden, China receives an influx of Western money, starts building things like manufacturing plants, small companies, and started learning how to do things, how to produce things. Suddenly, their people now have jobs, and their skills go up and up and up. Before you know it, and of course, that's over several decades, but that's nothing when you look at the history of a country. So over the course of a few short decades, the manufacturing power of China has grown astronomically. They're now at a point where they can produce anything. Absolutely anything. Their people have jobs. They have more millionaires probably than anybody else. Their people now have a much better standard of living. But the point is, they also have a lot of the Western money, probably most of the Western money, because China has become the overall producer of the world. Nothing happens. If you take UK, for example, we don't really produce that much. We just buy almost everything from cheaper places like China. So what that happens is that over time, the production costs go up because the standards of living also increase. So the Chinese people have moved from being very poor to now being well paid. I'm not sure, I haven't done enough research to find that out. I'm not sure if it's comparable to wages in the West, but there's definitely been a huge increase, which means now their goods are now not just more expensive, but they're also very high quality because obviously they've had decades to practice and improve their processes. And that, if you think about it as a strategy for China, that's absolutely amazing. To be able to develop your country, your industry with Western money, brilliant. And at the same time having a huge market where to sell your products to basically all the Western countries, and that includes the US, the European Union, all the English-speaking countries everywhere in the world. The market is huge. And all that was given to them for free. Of course, it required hard work on their part, which is they've done their bit. But we're now in a position where we cannot compete. we've lost the ability to produce things. We've lost manufacturing. We've lost entire industries. Our people lost money. And all that for a very short-term gain of buying cheaper goods for a while. And of course, what happens over time is that as China gets more and more and more of our money, and they produce more and more of the things we need, they are now in a position where they can start dictating what happens, because, if you don't play nice, you don't do what they say, they can cut you off. Either put your prices up or just not deal with you anymore from an economical point of view, which would be a disaster, let's face it, for any Western country. Not just the UK, but that's basically what happened. So when I was thinking about this over the weekend, and then I saw an interview with one of the former Conservative MPs that we have here in the Dorset area. Tobias Elwood was talking about this, but without showing any kind of understanding of how China got to this point. He was talking about how China is this huge threat at this point, and we need to learn how to deal with that. And I'm thinking, mate, you don't even realize that we are the ones responsible for their rise to power. We created the military and economical power China have with our own money. And it only took, from the 80s up to now, we're talking about 40 years. That's all it took. In 40 years, we managed to do that to ourselves. It is our fault. It's absolutely 100% our fault. Now, think what we achieved. For a while, we could buy cheaper goods. Okay? Brilliant. Everybody loved it. Western companies could make huge profits for a while. 40 years. Yeah? Brilliant. Everybody loved it. They could make some profits. Absolutely. But those profits came from Western countries because obviously the market was in the West. This is not money that came from China. No, China took our money and developed their own economy. So we basically just gave them away, free cash, and the license to build whatever, and the market that they didn't have any need to even worry about it. It's just there for the taking. So we did that. So now we're in a position of thinking, okay, how are we going to deal with China? Well, I'm afraid at this point the answers are not so simple anymore, because China is a huge international power, right? They're probably just after, maybe on the same level, I believe, with the US in terms of military power and size of the economy, I guess, or maybe a little bit below, I don't know exactly. But the point is they are a huge power. So how are we going to deal with that? Well, I'm not sure. Well, I do have some ideas. Nobody cares what I think, though, in the government level, but if you think about it, you would have to slowly or even quickly remove this dependency on China. And to me, that would mean to start producing what we need over here in the UK, so we become self-sustainable, let's say. So right now, the UK is in a very difficult position, and that position is made difficult by the fact that we are harming ourselves. Our government, the current one, Labour, but also previous one, the Conservative, did very high damage to our economy, specifically with their crazy net zero ideology focus. I'm not sure why, unless their goal was to absolutely harm this country. There's no other explanation, because it doesn't save the planet at all. All it does is destroy our country. I'm probably going to do an entire episode on net zero to see why I'm so against it and why I think it's such a dangerous thing to pursue. There's so many reasons, but this episode is about China. So if you start thinking about it, I'm sure you will agree with me that we, and by we I mean the West, are responsible for the rise of China's power. And it's quite interesting to see what the West can do when they put their minds together and their resources together. How one huge nation can evolve like that over a very short, less than half a century, basically. It's absolutely insane. Now, can we work our way out of this? Yes, I think we could, but we have to start cutting the amount of money we give to China. We need to start cutting the dependency we have on Chinese products, or any kind of products. And probably what the Americans are doing right now, when they're considering putting tariffs on Chinese products, is probably the right thing to do. Because at the end of the day, you're going to have to say, do you know what? No, we're not going to buy things from China anymore. Or any other countries, if someone else turns up to want to be exactly like China, same kind of thing. We're just not going to buy stuff from you anymore. We're not going to allow you to open factories over here. We're not going to allow you to buy land over here or anything like that. Now, Chinese are sitting on huge financial resources, which is why they can go ahead and buy stuff. You'll probably be surprised to see just how much land they own. And not just in the US, but in the UK as well. I need to do some research into this, and I probably will, because I want to see exactly what's happening. But I've also seen reports of Chinese police stations operating in the UK, just to keep an eye on their own citizens, because China is so big on democracy and freedom of speech that they keep an eye on what their citizens say, even when they live in other countries. Although, now to be completely honest, we are the last ones to talk about democracy and freedom of speech. Those are not concepts that we have in the UK either. Let's be honest here. So there you go. This is why I made the statement. We are definitely 100% responsible, and all in the pursuit of some short-term profits without thinking long-term. Now, love them or loathe them, the Chinese seem to have a way of thinking strategically over very long periods of time. We do not have that. Our governments generally just care about getting votes, getting elected again, which means all their ideas are a part of a very short 4-year cycle, sometimes even less than that. Because obviously they want to build enough goodwill with the people to make sure they get re-elected. And that's basically it. They don't care. None of them cares what happens to this country. None of them thinks, okay, is this good for the country or not? Let's think 10 years, 20 years. Nobody has a plan on how to do anything. That's, they can't see right now, and they can put in front of the electorate right now. And I'm afraid that's exactly what we need to do. This kind of short-term thinking is what got us into this very difficult position in the first place. The way out is to start not just thinking about the next few years, but also what happens over the next 20, 30, 40 years. And that's the difficult part. And governments struggle with this, especially here in the UK. And the reason for that is because they never have the right motivations, and they never have the right ideas or the right goals in mind. When was the last time you've seen a government which put the British people at the top of their head? And you never see that. Nobody cares. With the current Labour government, you can see they are 100% anti-British. They generally do not care. All they care about is getting close to the EU so they can become slaves to the same globalist organization they seem to love so much for some strange reason. But what I'm not seeing any politician or any party that could actually get out of this sphere of influence. I'm hoping reform. So I'm hoping reform are the ones who can do this. But what we do need, we need a party, we need a group of people who get together and start thinking, what's the best thing that we can do for the people of this country and for this country? And both, you have to think both short-term and long-term. Because nobody's going to care about your plans for the next 20 years when they're starving and freezing to death tomorrow. Do you see what I mean? So there has to be a balance. You have to do enough so people see the improvements in their lives, short term, but also that you have a plan going forward. And that, in my mind anyway, that would allow a government to continue and probably be re-elected, because people know, yeah, these guys have a plan. We know what they're doing. And it requires them to be completely open and put everything on the table and say, look, this is the problem. This is how we think we can solve it. And then the people can decide. But I think that's the only way out of it. So how we deal with China? Well, there you go. We're going to have to cut our dependency on Chinese goods. We have to stop giving them money for everything. And we have to start being self-sustainable. And there are many ways that we can do that. I'm probably going to talk about this in a future episodes on how we can become sustainable. Now, please understand this. This is just a guy with opinions, okay? But I think we need to do more of this. We need to start putting our heads together, discussing things, and think, hey, this is the problem. Let's find a solution. And usually the solutions are found through discussions, through debates, through through freedom of speech. All the things that we've lost and we don't seem to be able to do anymore. Even having a simple conversation without calling everybody racist, bigots, whatever, Putin lovers, Chinese lovers, Martian lovers, whatever, doesn't matter. So we have a part, we played a part in this as well, the normal population, because we are the ones who allowed this to happen. We are now at a point where we need to start saying, enough of this, no more. Yes, we're going to have a proper conversation about whatever, and we're going to find a way out. And anyone who tries to silence others can go somewhere else. North Korea is open, by the way, for these kind of people. This is supposed to be a democratic country with freedom of speech, okay? And we need to get back to that. The only way we get back to that is by taking a stand, saying no more, not allowing cancellations to happen, not listening to mainstream media, and just generally doing what we think is right. That's the only way out of this. So anyway, let me know what you think. Any comments, any ideas? We can even have a chat, by the way. And the next episode, I will talk about something else. This one was supposed to be about, about communism, but I'll get back to that fairly soon anyway. Until then, thank you very much for listening, and I hope you will come back in the future. Thank you.